The Government of India has released Offshore Wind Energy Lease Rules 2023. In terms of Territorial Waters, Continental Shelves, Exclusive Economic Zone and Other Maritime Zones Act 1976, the government has released these rules. We will read the rules for the benefit of our subscribers. So I am skipping the Hindi part and we will read the English part and analyze the outcome of these rules and how it will help and benefit the wind sector. So these rules have been issued by Ministry of External Affairs 19th December 2023. In exercise of powers conferred under Section 15 of the Territorial Water Continental Shelves, Exclusive Economic Zones and Other Maritime Zones Act 1976, the central government hereby makes the following rules to regulate the grant of lease of offshore areas, namely. Alright, so Rule 1 is short title and commencement. These rules may be called the Offshore Wind Energy Lease Rules 2023. So they are called Offshore Winds Energy Lease Rule 2023. They shall come into force on the date of their publication in the official Gazette, and they have been publication has been done on 19th December. Also, they have come into the force. First of all, Rule 2 is definitions. One definition act is Territorial Waters, Continental Shelf, Exclusive Economic Zones and Other Maritime Zones Act 1976. Then agreement means agreement entered between the central government and lessee. Central government means the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy in the Government of India, which administers these rules. So Ministry of External Affairs have released these rules, but the administration of these rules will be done by Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Then it is defined decommissioning. Means decommissioning of the wind turbines, machinery and used cable, as well as uprooting and demolition of the foundation structure, along with removal of the debris and returning the seabed to its original configuration in accordance with the applicable laws, international practices. E defines designated agency, which means the agency designated by the central government for bidding or monitoring the projects. Generally, SECI, Solar Energy Corporation of India, is designated for these purposes, but then Government of India or Central Government or Ministry of New and Renewable Energy can opt for other agencies like IREDA, Indian Renewable Energy Development Agencies, or NTPC and other PSUs like NHPC, SJVN also. Then F clause defines designated leased areas, which means designated portion of lease areas where entry restriction can be applied for a notified period to carry out activities related to offshore wind energy projects and offshore transmission projects. Then G defines definition. Geophysical survey means the physical examination of the water column, seabed and subsoil for spatial studies, preparation of geological maps and geological sections defining the seabed condition of different zones to help in designing the foundation structure for each offshore wind turbines for electrical power generation. We move to the next definition. H defines Geotechnical survey, which means the drilling of boreholes to source scientific information and other data relating to soil and subsoil conditions, including assessment of its load bearing capacity, with an objective to set up the offshore wind projects. I defines lease. Lease means an agreement to grant rights over seabed without exclusive economic zone to lessee by the central government for a fixed term against payment of lease amount. These definitions are important because throughout these rules, these words will be used, and when these words are used, we have to keep in mind how these words have been defined. Alright, lessee means, in the J part, lessee means a person or an entity who has been granted a lease. So generally a wind developer or any other person can be granted lease. K defines lease issuing authority, means an authority designated by the central government for offshore wind energy project and offshore wind transmission projects. So there are two kinds of projects. One is offshore wind energy projects and second is offshore wind transmission projects. So lease issuing authority, it may be SECI, Solar Energy Corporation of India, or it may be the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, or Ministry of New and Renewable Energy can outsource or to it any other entity, government, especially government entity, which can become a lease issuing authority. Next, Clause I defines National Institute of Wind Energy. National Institute of Wind Energy is headquartered in Chennai. It is an autonomous institution under the administrative control of Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Clause M defines offshore wind energy project, which means a complete system consisting of wind turbine, offshore pooling substation, array of offshore cables, including intra-array cables and inter-array, the power generation system from other renewable sources utilized on offshore platform to meet the auxiliary power needs within the exclusive economic zone with fixed foundation or floating foundation. So foundation can be fixed also, it can be floating foundation to generate electrical power in natural sea environment. N defines offshore wind transmission project, which means transmission power evacuation system from offshore pooling points to onshore pooling points for the purpose of offshore wind energy projects. Ultimately, finally, O defines wind turbines, which means wind operated electricity generator that converts kinetic energy of wind into electrical energy. Let us come to Rule 3. Rule 3 talks about installation commissioning of offshore wind energy under a lease. No person or entity shall install offshore wind energy projects or offshore transmission projects except under a lease granted under these rules. So if Ministry of New and Renewable Energy or the designated entity grants lease, then only the person can, or a company or a wind developer can install these offshore wind farms. Rule 4 talks about regulatory mechanism. The central government may utilize the services of National Institute of Wind Energy, an autonomous body for matters related to wind energy. So National Institute of Wind Energy has been given a special status to create a regulatory mechanism for offshore wind projects. Rule 5 talks about grant of lease. The central government may lease out offshore areas within exclusive economic zone for offshore wind energy projects and offshore wind transmission projects. Number 1. So, firstly, the offshore area for the lease shall be identified by the central government based on wind resource assessment followed by maritime spatial planning. Whenever we say central government, so we should remember the definition, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Alright. Second part of the grant of lease is the selection process of the lessee shall be governed by National Offshore Wind Energy Policy. So National Offshore Wind Energy Policy has to be kept in mind while going for an offshore wind project. 3. Clearance from the Ministry of Defence, Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of External Affairs, Ministry of Environment and Forest, Department of Space, Ministry of Port, Shipping and Waterways shall be obtained before granting of the lease. So clearance from 5 ministries are required. One is Ministry of Defence, second is Ministry of Home Affairs, 3 of Ministry of External Affairs, 4th is Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, 5th is Department of Space, 6th is Ministry of Port, Shipping and Waterways. So 6 ministries clearance is required for setting up an offshore wind project. Sub-rule 2 of Rule 5 says the lessee shall enter into the agreement with central government for the grant of lease and for setting up wind energy capacities according to guidelines issued by the Government of India. So through these rules, Ministry of External Affairs has delegated its powers or transferred its powers with respect to offshore wind to Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. So Ministry of New and Renewable Energy will sign or execute the agreement, lease agreement. Sub Rule 3 of Rule 5 also speaks, every lease shall contain such of the terms, covenants and conditions under these rules, and additional terms, covenant and conditions that may be stipulated in the agreement between the central government and the lessee, and the details of lease shall be published in the official Gazette. So whenever a lease is granted, that lease or the terms and conditions, covenant or conditions, they shall be published as additional terms in the Gazette of India. Rule 6 talks about right of lessee. Sub Rule 1 says, subject to the terms and conditions of the agreement that may be arrived between the central government and the lessee after consultation with the state government and other stakeholders, the rights of the lessee within the lease area shall be as follows. So these are the rights. So there are 3 specific sub rules where rights have been designated of the lessee. Number 1, every lessee shall have the exclusive right to carry out activities related to offshore wind energy and offshore wind transmission, including studies, surveys, for fulfilling obligation under these lease. So exclusive right, so one company or one entity will be given these exclusive rights. 2, right to use waterways for required work related to offshore wind or offshore transmission, or both as the case may be. So waterways can be used for offshore wind and offshore transmission, and or it can be a combined project, so both of them. 3, every lessee shall have the right to restrict. So they can restrict entry of certain items or entities. One is A, the entry into designated lease area for such period as notified by the central government for the purpose of construction or operation and maintenance of offshore wind farm. B, the navigation of boats, ferries and ships obstructing the operation of the project. So the lessee, every lessee shall have the right to restrict. C, movement within 50 meters distance from the wind turbine foundation and 500 meters distance from the substation. So wind turbine, from the wind turbine 50 meters the movement can be restricted, and with respect to substation it may be 500 meters the restriction can happen. D, the anchoring or use of fixed fishing gears within the designated lease area as per Rule 6(3)(a). E part says activities such as scuba diving, windsurfing, kiting and the like within the designated lease area as per Rule 6(3)(a) can be restricted by whoever is the lessee. There is a proviso also. So additional condition has been provided that activities such as fishing for the purpose of livelihood and other activities that may coexist with the offshore wind energy farms in the interest of the common public shall be permissible if they do not affect the normal working of the offshore wind energy farm. There is a note also. The designated lease area would vary from measurement and exploration activities during the construction period and during the operation and maintenance period. The designated lease areas shall be approved by the central government, and the lessee shall have to make wider circulation of the notification in 3 local newspapers and 3 national newspapers. So in the 6 local and national newspapers, there has to be publication of the area which has been, this is designated lease area. There is a exception which has been provided that if there is a ship fishing vehicle local which is not interfering, that can be coexist with the offshore wind farm. So it is allowed as per the proviso of this rule. Alright, so next condition is the lessee shall not have any right for exploration and extraction of minerals and other resources from the seabed, subsoil, super adjacent waters and any other activity except offshore wind power generation related works. So the right available is confined to offshore wind power generation and not for exploration of minerals and materials and other resources from seabed, subsoil, etc. Sub-rule 3 says the lessee shall not sublease any part of the lease without the approval of the central government. So, subleasing is allowed provided approval of the central government has been taken. Rule 7 says date of effect of the lease. Every lease shall be effective from the date as specified in the lease agreement. Rule 8 says area and term of the lease. Sub-rule 1 of Rule 8 says the area covered by the lease shall be specified and the lease shall be valid for a period of 3 years for resource measurement and related study survey activities. Further, extendable for adequate reasons by an additional 2 years. So it can be 3 plus 2 years. Post expiry of the 5-year period, the lease shall expire and all clearances for the lessee shall be withdrawn and the lessee shall have to deposit the study and survey data to National Institute of Wind Energy unless the lessee has started work to set up wind energy capacity as per the terms of the lease. So within 5 years, if the setting up of the wind energy capacity is not done, in that case the lease will expire and all the data collected has to be submitted to National Institute of Wind Energy. Sub-rule 2 of Rule 8 says for construction and operation of offshore wind energy project, the lease shall be extended for 35 years, which can be extended further on case-to-case basis subject to functional viability and safety of the project. So lease period will be 35 years for construction and operation of offshore wind energy project. Alright. Sub-rule 3 says the area covered under the lease shall ordinarily be 25 square kilometer to 500 square kilometer and the same may vary depending on the size of the project. So it can be 25 square kilometer and it can extend to 500 square kilometers. Rule 9 says security deposit, annual lease fees and shedding of areas, etc. The applicant shall deposit the refundable security deposit to the designated agency before the lease is granted by the Lease Issuing Authority within 3 months from the letter of demand to the lessee. So a letter of demand will be issued to the lessee and lessee within 3 months has to deposit the lease amount. 1. Installation and commissioning of an offshore wind project, a sum of rupees 1 lakh per megawatt. Alright, so 1 lakh rupees per megawatt has to be deposited. Second, for a separate offshore wind transmission project, a sum of rupees 50,000 per megawatt. Okay, alright. Third, the security deposit will be returned to the lessee after successful operation of the offshore wind energy project and decommissioning at the end of the lease agreement. So when it will be decommissioned, this lease amount, which is 1 lakh per megawatt and 50,000 per megawatt for transmission project, will be returned, provided that the security deposit shall be returned after production of certificate of proper decommissioning and adherence to the terms and conditions of lease from designated authority. Alright. Sub-rule 2 of Rule 9 says the applicant shall pay a yearly lease fees at a rate of rupees 1 lakh per square kilometer per year in advance. So every year 1 lakh rupees per square kilometer per year in advance has to be calculated for each square kilometer or part thereof covered by the lease. The fee is required to be deposited within 1 month from the letter of demand from the Lease Issuing Authority. Sub-rule 3 says the lease lessee shall be allowed to relinquish the entire or partial lease area on giving 30 days prior notice to the central government and paying the yearly lease fees for the next 5 years or up to the lease period, whichever is earlier. So there is an option of relinquishment also, but when somebody is relinquishing the lease deed, then he has to pay for next 5 years the yearly lease. If the remaining time of is less, then the lesser amount has to be paid. The proviso says, provided that in case the entire proposed project capacity is commissioned in a partial lease area, the remaining partial lease area shall be relinquished on giving 30 days prior notice and paying the lease fees for the next 30 days or up to the lease period, whichever is earlier. There is second proviso also, which provided further that in case either full or partial capacity of the project cannot be installed due to force majeure or due to technical viability or due to regulatory clearance as accepted by the central government, the relevant lease area shall be relinquished on giving 30 days prior notice and paying the lease fees for the next 30 days or up to lease period, whichever is earlier. Sub-rule 4 says, in case the activity related to study or survey or offshore wind project is not commenced within 6 months from the effective date of lease, the central government may cancel the lease and forfeit the security deposit. Sub-rule 5 says, no royalty shall be applicable for the development of offshore wind energy project. So no royalty is applicable. Rule 10 provides for identification of areas. Within 3 months from the effective date of the lease, the lessee shall display notices or floaters or signage or indicators at all conspicuous points on the area covered by the lease so as to indicate its boundaries, and shall thereafter during the term of such lease maintain such notices or floaters or signage or indicators subject to the satisfaction of the central government and other stakeholders including state government, Coast Guard and Indian Navy. Rule 11 provides for transfer or assignment. The lessee shall not assign or transfer his right, title and interest in respect of the lease or in respect of the area within the territorial waters or continental shelf of India covered by such lease without written consent of the central government. So transfer and assignment can happen, but this can happen only with the consent of the central government. Rule 12. Right of preemption. In the case of emergency due to natural disaster, civil unrest or external aggression, the central government shall have the right of preemption of the lease for power generation from such projects during an emergency, provided that where the project has been commissioned and is generating, the lease shall be paid, lessee shall be paid the cost of power which would not be dispatched during the period of preemption. Rule 13 provides general principles. The lessee shall 1. Maintain all equipment, infrastructure and wind turbine capable of producing power in good repair and condition on the area covered by the lease. 2. Execute all prospecting, installation, commissioning and operation of wind energy project with proper workmanship in accordance with the instructions, directions and orders that may be issued by the central government. 3. The lessee shall have a local office in India to conduct all the operations and designate a nodal officer who shall be responsible for complying with all the terms and conditions of the lease. So local office in India is compulsory, and all the activities and operations for the offshore wind project in the continental shelf of India has to be done from the local office. 4. The lessee shall insure the equipments, men and third party during operations. Insurance of the equipment is compulsory, of the man is compulsory, for the third parties also insurance is compulsory. 5. The lessee shall indemnify the central government or its assignee from any liabilities. 6th, upon the termination of the lease or upon the relinquishment of the any area covered by it, the lessee shall furnish confidentiality complete records of all the survey or investigation data such as meteorological, bathymetric, ocean current, sonar data, physical oceanographic data, surface geological maps and sections, magnetic and gravity measurement and anomaly maps, seismic profile, sections and structures counter maps, electrical and telluric current survey data, and other information having direct or indirect bearing on the offshore wind energy possibilities in the area connected by the lease collected by the lessee to the central government, excluding the information covered under intellectual property rights of the lessee. So if there is any intellectual property rights of lessee, excluding that, all the data has to be provided to the central government. The data shall be shared with the integrated headquarters, Navy, Ministry of Defence also. 7th, the lessee shall not be allowed to share data with any third party except in relation to executing the offshore wind energy project. Prior permission shall be taken from the integrated headquarters before sharing of any data. 8. The lessee shall not be allowed to use data related to offshore wind projects such as oceanographic current, bathymetric and geology or wind profile for any other purpose whatsoever after relinquishing the lease area. 9. The lessee shall not be involved in any unsolicited, unauthorized activity which may be deemed illegal or against national interest both within the offshore wind farm in adjoining area of land and water around such designated or demarcated offshore wind farms. 10. No material shall be permitted to be dumped in the maritime zones, continental shelf, territorial waters and exclusive economic zone at the time of installation, during the operation and on termination of the lease. 11. Security of the wind farm is to be ensured through physical and electronic means by the lessee, and the security measures instituted shall be intimated to the Indian Navy through Integrated Headquarters Navy. 12. Requisite real-time surveillance information shall be shared with the Coast Guard, Navy and other agencies identified by the central government. 13. The central government may authorize the Coast Guard, Navy and other identified agencies for fixing additional security surveillance systems as deemed required. 14. All movements of the personnel or material shall take place from the designated port and the same shall be cleared by the port security, police and customs. So 3 institutions have to give clearance: port security, police and customs. 15. Relevant documents shall be produced for inspection by Indian Coast Guard on patrol in the area. 16. The antecedent of all foreign nationals engaged be verified by the concerned security agency of the central government. 17. The survey must be confined to the area for which permission or lease has been granted. It shall be ensured that no civil vital area or vital points identified or communicated to the lessee get affected during the course of survey and at the time of installation or operation of the project. 18. The lessee will have to ensure necessary precautions and measures for navigational safety, including providing data for the issue of amendments in charts, obstruction lights in accordance with extant rules. Rule 14. It provides for cancellation of lease. So in these conditions, the lease can be cancelled for offshore wind or offshore transmission project. 1. Sub-rule 1 says, the lease shall be cancelled in case the lessee at any point of time, number 1, violates the terms and conditions of the lease or fails to fulfill or contravenes any of the terms or covenant or conditions contained therein, or 2, fails to use the area covered under lease for the purpose of which the lease was granted within the stipulated lease period. So within the lease period, if the lessee fails to construct a wind farm or the undersea cable lines or transmission line, then it may be cancelled. 3. Uses such areas for the purpose other than that for which the lease was granted. 4. Causes irreparable environmental damage to flora and fauna, or 5. Fails to produce requisite documents pertaining to the project. Sub-rule 2 says, in case the failure contravention is considered to be of remedial nature, the central government may give notice to such lessee, requiring him to ensure remedy within a specified period of time granted for the purpose from the date of receipt of the notice, and convey that a penalty of forfeiture of whole or part of the security deposit may be imposed if such remedial measure work not done within such period. 1. In case the imposed penalty is higher than security deposit, the lessee shall be liable to pay the difference. 2. The central government is satisfied that the failure contravention in use on ground mentioned above, which cannot be remedied on giving 60-day notice to such lessee, and after considering representation, if any, made by him, it may order for forfeiture of the whole or any part of the security deposit amount made under sub-rule 1 of rule 9 of these rules and cancel the lease. 3. Such cancellation shall be published in the official Gazette and shall take place from the date of such publication, provided that if it is established that the delay or the failure on the part of such lease or to fulfill any of the terms, covenant and conditions of lease due to force majeure, the period of such delay shall be excluded from the specified period of time granted for the purpose. Rule 15 provides for spacing of wind energy turbines and offshore substations. The central government may issue instructions depending on requirement as per the prevailing international norms for, number 1, the spacing of wind turbines, 2, the spacing of offshore wind substations, 3, least distance of wind turbines from boundary coordinates of the lease area. Rule 16. Decommissioning. Lessee shall be required to decommission all installation and clear the seabed from all obstructions created by the project. 2. Lessee shall have to complete the decommissioning within 2 years of termination of the lease and either reuse, recycle or responsibly dispose of all material removed, and the central government shall issue a separate guidelines for the decommissioning of offshore wind project. 17. Delivery of premises upon termination of lease. After termination of lease, वर्षा अनम्यूट करो बेटा अपने आप को. All right. Rule 16 provides for decommissioning. Lessee shall be required to decommission all installation and clear the seabed from all obstructions created by the project. Sub-rule 2. Lessee shall have to complete the decommissioning within 2 years of termination of lease and either reuse, recycle or responsibly dispose of all material removed, and the central government shall issue a separate guidelines for the decommissioning of offshore wind project. Rule 17. Delivery of premises upon termination of lease. After termination of the lease under these rules, the lessee shall hand over the lease area to the central government. 1. The lessee within 2 years after the termination of the lease under these rules or within such further time as the central government may grant, remove or dispose of all the components of offshore wind energy project or offshore transmission projects or both, as the case may be, such as wind turbines or its parts, equipments, machinery, cables, electrical infrastructure and civil infrastructure existing during the lease period, provided that where the lease needs time extension for decommission, the lessee may apply to the central government and the same may be granted or refused as it may deem fit for reasons to be recorded in writing. 2. If such store, equipment, tools, machineries and other infrastructure are not so removed or disposed of, they may be sold by auction by order of the central government at the risk of the lessee, and the proceeds of such sale shall be held by the central government until applied for and obtained by the lessee. 3. The entire cost of removal and disposal process shall be borne by the lessee. Rule 18. Regulation of operations. The lessee shall carry out the construction, installation, commissioning and operation and maintenance of the offshore wind energy projects in accordance with the technical standards and instructions issued by the central government. Rule 19. Suspension of operations. No lessee without prior approval of the central government shall 1. Suspend normal power production from wind energy installation. 2. Suspend the export of power to the onshore pooling station. 3. Abandon the projects. 4. Repower the offshore wind farm beyond sanctioned project capacity beyond a tolerance of 5%. 5. Resume operations after a previous suspension without giving 15 days prior notice to the central government, provided that if normal operations have to be suspended due to any unforeseen reason, notice thereof shall be given to the central government within 24 hours of such suspension. Rule 20. Control of operations. In case the lease area is used for activities causing threat to national security or irreparable damage to the environment, the central government, as it may appear to it after giving notice to the lessee, shall 1. Assume control of the operation of offshore wind turbine in isolation or in groups or complete project within a particular zone. 2. Appoint a such agency as may be deemed necessary and authorize them to enter upon the premises where wind turbines are installed and take over the possession of the zone. Rule 21. Agency for supervision. The central government may nominate or constitute a suitable agency consisting of such number of persons as the central government may think fit. हाँ जी, आधा घंटा लगेगा, एक रिकॉर्डिंग कर रहा हूँ मैं, आधे घंटे में आऊँगा, रिकॉर्डिंग कर रहा हूँ, 15 मिनट्स में आ जाऊँगा, कंप्लीट हो रहा है बस, ठीक है, श्योर श्योर। Rule 21. Agency for supervision. The central government may nominate or constitute a suitable agency consisting of such number of persons as the central government may think fit. 1. For the purpose of ascertaining whether the provisions contained in those rules and any orders, instructions and directions issued thereunder have been or are being complied with by the lessee and whether the prospecting or wind energy production operations are being carried in accordance with these rules. 2. To supervise the production, including getting real-time data about performance to ensure the optimal efficiency and delivery and submit report to the central government. 3. To carry out its functions under the rules, depute any officer authorized by it on this behalf and enter into the inspection and inspect any place to monitor the operation and functional efficiency. The Indian Coast Rule 2 Sub-Rule 2 says the Indian Coast Guard is empowered to board, inspect, check documents at wind farm such as license, photo, identification of the personnel, make copies as necessary, and on suspicion detain personnel, seize material for further investigation or action as per applicable laws. Rule 22. Default in payment. Payment under these rules, if not paid within the time specified for any payment, shall be increased by the rate of 5% for each month or portion of a month on pro rata basis, during which such fees or other payments are not paid. Sub-rule 2. If any lease fee or other payment due in respect of a lease is pending for more than 3 months, the central government may cancel such lease, and the cancellation shall take effect from the date of its publication in the official Gazette. Rule 23. Dispute settlement mechanism. In case any dispute arises, efforts for amicable dispute resolution shall be made by both the parties, and the committee chaired by Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy shall consider the matter before going for arbitration. So stage 1 is dispute resolution. Stage 1 for dispute resolution is that it will go to Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, and then stage 2 it will go for arbitration. So rule 2 says, in case a dispute relating to any provisions of lease agreement signed as per these rules is not settled amicably, it shall be referred to arbitrators. Sub rule 3 says, there shall be 3 arbitrators, one to be appointed by each party and the third by the 2 appointed arbitrators. Sub rule 4 says, each party shall bear its own expenses at the arbitration, and arbitral tribunal expenses shall be shared by the parties to the dispute unless otherwise decided by the tribunal. Sub rule 5 says, the provisions of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act and the rules made thereunder shall apply to the arbitral proceedings under these rules, subject to the sub-rule 2. So these are the rules. अपतटीय पवन ऊर्जा पट्टा नियम 2023. So the Ministry of External Affairs, through notification dated 19th December 2023, has released these rules.